All right, so when we first shot real estate, we were delivering 20 to 25 pictures for our agent. When we shot for an architect, we were delivering 8 to 10 pictures. And now we're getting into the commercial shoots and we're honing it down even more. We're gonna be shooting 2 restaurants, we're gonna be shooting advertisements for both of them, and we're gonna be walking with 2 images for one restaurant and 3 for the other. So it's getting even more refined, and the images have to be that much better. So these images are gonna be used for advertising, for, you know, promoting the space, promoting these restaurants. We want them to be as perfect as possible. Now, a lot of the advertising for these restaurants is going to be made up of pictures of the food, and of course that'll be combined with pictures of, my shots of the interiors and exteriors. So if a magazine is doing a feature on a restaurant, or the restaurant decides to run an advertisement in a magazine, on the internet, wherever, they might only use 1 or 2 of my pictures, most likely 1, and the other pictures will be supplemented by a food photographer who comes in and shoots the food, because of course they're trying to get you in the space, but they also want to sell you on the food they create. So what we're doing is we're just going to make 2 or 3 amazing images, interior or exterior, so that they can use those over and over and pair them with images from a food photographer. Keep in mind that their food and menus are constantly changing, so it's always going to be different, but when you're shooting the interior or an exterior, it might be that one shot. If it's good enough, they could use it for 20, 30, or even 50 years to advertise their restaurant. So getting this as perfect as possible, even if it takes all day, is definitely paramount here. They're paying us good money for this. We want to deliver an image that they can use for many, many years to come. And keep in mind how highly competitive these commercial arenas are. For example, we're doing restaurants. Charleston is a huge foodie city. It's got tons of restaurants. There's other cities that are just like this. If you shoot one picture, one amazing shot for a restaurant, other restaurants, you better believe, are gonna see that and they say, who's that photographer that made that space look so incredible? We gotta have them. And of course, they all talk. So if you do one killer job for one company, they're gonna refer you. If someone else comes to them, they're gonna ask and say, who shot your pictures? We really love it. And if they wanna tell, they'll say, oh, it was that Mike Kelley guy, or it was, John Smith or whoever. Your name will get around if you do a really, really good job and knock it out of the park. And that's where a lot of money is. There's a ton of money in high-end commercial imagery in tons of different industries. And as you see how these complex images come to life, you'll also begin to appreciate the licensing model, which we talked about in the business chapter. My goal with these commercial shoots is to create such a good picture that no one else can create. And then after that, I'm going to license that year after year after year. And because they did such a good job with it, it will create automatic income, because they want to keep using that image, and they know they can't get it from anyone else. They can't go to Joe Schmo on Craigslist and say, hey, can you come shoot it? Here's what Mike did. We want you to recreate that. They won't be able to. So when you knock these out of the park, you make amazing images, and then you license them, you're just going to set yourself up to make money year after year after year. It's kind of like a mini retirement fund. Before you start taking on these jobs, you've got to realize, and you will see as we get through this, how much pressure is on us. I mean, we have 1 hour to create an image that a restaurant will want to use year after year after year. And if you don't have your technique nailed, and you don't have the pre-visualization in your head, you're not completely ready to go in every aspect, you might fumble the ball a little bit in here, and no one wants that to happen. You really need to make sure that you've got these techniques absolutely nailed. But when you do, let me tell you, you will set yourself up for success in architectural photography. Here we are at a restaurant called Husk in Charleston, South Carolina. It's an incredible restaurant. It's won a number of awards, and on top of that, it's located in these 2 beautiful buildings right behind me. They have a really cool detached bar over here, and this gorgeous building that was built in the late 1800s, and we're gonna be shooting some interiors and exteriors today. We're gonna be shooting a shot in here of the main dining hall, and then after that, we're gonna go over to the bar, get some interiors over there, and then tonight, we'll be shooting a twilight exterior using all different kinds of light. We'll be using twilight, ambient, flash, and I'm gonna show you how to put it all together. So we got a chance to scout this location yesterday, and there's 2 very different interiors between the buildings. Over here in the main dining area, it's a very light and airy space. There's light woods, light paint, light walls, very upbeat, and that's gonna dictate how I'm gonna shoot it. I'm gonna shoot that with a light and airy mood that represents the restaurant. However, in the bar, it's a really cool dark lounge with dark furniture, dark wood, kind of has a very ambient feel going on. So we're gonna do our best to represent both of those different styles. So let's take a minute to talk about the composition here. A lot of photographers might walk in and say, I want to show the room. Let's shoot at 17 millimeters as wide as we can. We'll stand in the corner, we'll get the whole thing. We'll be done, quick and easy. But a big, wide shot like that isn't very compelling, not very interesting, and not very inviting. The goal here is to get people in the door, eating food, enjoying the space. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to try to create a light, airy shot that has a bit of mood to it. We're not going to shoot it as wide as we can. We're going to focus on one part of the room and make that one part feel as inviting an area as we possibly can. So instead of shooting from one corner as wide as I can, I've chosen to position myself right over a table, almost as if you're sitting right there. I want them to experience the mood and atmosphere of the room, and shooting this way will definitely put the viewer right there. So let's talk about how I'm going to light this image. Here's an ambient exposure, and as you can see, there's a few issues. That foreground table is completely overexposed. It just completely ruins the feel of the image and your eye goes right to it. If you look further into the room, it looks okay. The exposure's all right, but it's a bit muddy. There's not a lot of contrast going on. It could be a lot better. If you look into that far doorway at about 2 o'clock position, as you can see, it's a total black hole. So the first thing I want to do is bring the light under control. And in order to do that, I'm going to raise my shutter speed a little bit and add some light. I've put 2 Einsteins on the left-hand side of the frame, just out of the image. Those are both bouncing into the ceiling. Bouncing into the ceiling serves 2 purposes. It gives us a nice white reflector, and it creates a nice soft ambient light that'll fill the room. If I were to bounce off the wall, as you can see, they're a little bit green. If we were to bounce there, the lights would pick up that color and wash this green tint over the entire image. So as you can see in this shot, we've got the background of our main room lit a little better, but there's still a bunch of problems. The next thing I'm going to do is work on that open doorway. Since this is just a little tiny area, you're only going to need a little bit of light. I got a handful of speedlights with me, and I'm going to take my camera range and iPad back out there and light it from there. One cool feature of this little room is that large hutch containing all that hand-cut wood. In order to light that, I've got a speedlight on the floor, kissing a little bit of light up into that wood. In addition, I have a light on the right-hand side of that door frame bouncing into the ceiling for fill. Lastly, I have one light aimed up at the side of the hutch to bring out the specular highlights and add some shadow. So now take a look at this image. You can see the 2 Einsteins lighting the main room and the 3 little speedlights lighting that background room. The next thing I've got to take care of is that light coming in the window onto the tables. As you can see, there's 2 tables here that are a little bit overexposed. In order to deal with that, I'm going to scrim the windows. So my assistant David here has a big reflector with translucent cloth on it. He's going to put that into the windows, which is going to tame that harsh sunlight coming in and create some nice soft fill light instead. So all I'm worried about for these first couple shots is getting that first table under control. Once I get that under control, I'll deal with the near table and get that under control as well. So now it's time to light the foreground, which is the most important part of the image. I had my assistant hold the scrim over the near window right on our left, which is going to take that harsh sunlight and turn it into some nice soft directional light. So here's a shot of the table with just the window scrimmed. It's a nice soft light, but I feel like the right-hand side of it is a little bit dark. So what I'm going to do is add a shoot-through umbrella with a speedlight in it to add some soft fill light to bring up those shadows just a little bit. I don't want to overpower the light from the window because I like those natural shadows coming in from left to right. So just a little kiss of light is all I'm going to need. The image is looking pretty good so far, but I feel like it's missing one thing. I noticed that there were some servers getting ready and setting up the lunch service. So what I did was I asked one of them to come over and model for us. This adds a little bit of a human element and gives the restaurant some life. An empty restaurant can look a little bit bare, and a big part of this restaurant is the decor and dress of the servers. It's got a lot of southern charm to it, and I feel that this really ties the image together. So that's it as far as location work goes. It was a relatively simple image, but there's still some Photoshop work that I want to do to bring it all together. So let's go to the computer and I'll show you what I do next. So as I started looking through the images that we took for this interior shoot at Husk, I started to realize, the gravity of the situation. It's a working restaurant. It's a bit crazy in there. We only had an hour to get set up, get our shot, get out. Was servers coming and going. They're getting ready to set up for their lunch, and I'm going to show you, how to fix a lot of the problems that we run into. For example, when I shoot, I usually have, the restaurant shut down or whatever place of business closed, or it's a house and there's not people running around. But in this case, there were servers running around. After I got set up, tables got bumped, staging got changed, people were coming in and out. There were mirrors everywhere. It's pretty much the definition of a nightmare shoot, and I'm going to show you everything that went wrong and then how we use Photoshop to fix it. So a lot of people are kind of naysayers of Photoshop, but it's situations like these where you'll really see how much of an incredible, helpful tool it is. So let's get started, and I'll show you how to fix everything that went wrong and some things that did go right as well. So let's get in here. All right, so what I've done is I've gone through and I've pulled out from Aperture the images that I'm going to use. And what I have here, I've got the server that I had as a model. I have an ambient-only frame. As you can see, it's a pretty cool dining room, but this image on its own has a number of issues. Obviously, this table is way blown out. We can't have that. It's just a very low contrast, kind of muddy image. There's a girl over here getting some menus ready or something. And after that, I scrimmed this window over here on the left to kind of tame that light. As you can see, it goes from that to that. It gives a nice soft light on there. And then after that, I have a flash image, which really adds a lot of color, contrast, and definition. But obviously, it's a little bit too harsh and it's too flashy. It's just the nature of the room was if we wanted to flash it, we were gonna have to kill the ambient light. And I really like the ambient inviting feel that this restaurant had to offer. So I'm gonna do the best I can here to combine all of these shots to create one final image. So I'll try to get the best of all 3 or 4 worlds here to make one good shot. So as you can see, the flash frame provides some nice contrast and color, and a little bit of ambient fill, but the ambient frame obviously has much more of a natural inviting feel to it. So I'm gonna use the flash as my base layer here, and I'm gonna build on top of that. Like you saw on location here, I scrimmed the window to the left to provide a nice soft light on this table rather than that harsh overexposed light. And the first thing I'm gonna do is get this table to work on top of this frame. So the way I'm gonna do that is, well, I'm gonna pen tool around it, and there's a couple reasons for that. Usually I would use my big soft brush, but if you take a look here, you can see that somewhere in here, the table got bumped, or someone reset the cups and the plates. And if I would use a brush, I'll show you what would happen. What would happen is I would get some ghosting in here, and I don't want that. So I'll use my brush real quick, and you can see if I want to go at any opacity other than 100, I'm going to get that ghosting, and that's pretty ugly, and we want to avoid that. So here's problem number 1. Instead of using a big soft brush, I'm going to have to go in with a pen tool and be very accurate about this. So first thing I'm going to do is turn on my scrimmed table layer, and I'm just going to get right in here, and I'm going to pen tool all around this table. All right, so here we are finishing up our pen tool selection, and I'm going to close that path and hit Apple Enter to select it. And I'll select the layer. And all I'm going to do is go over here and hit the Add Layer Mask button as usual. And boom, there we are. There's our nice soft light on the table. It goes from that hard, kind of very distracting light to a nice soft light. And you can see all the detail throughout, which is pretty nice. So after that, what I'm going to do is turn on the ambient layer here, and I'm going to see what I like from the ambient layer compared to what I don't like from our previously combined flash and scrimmed table layers. And there's a couple things I like. So what I'm going to do is go through, and I'm going to add a mask to this, and I'm going to fill it with black. So add my layer mask G for the paint bucket tool, fill it with black to hide it all, and white brush to reveal what's underneath. And I'm just going to go in, and I definitely like the ceiling from the ambient layer, so I am going to brush all of that in, and that will get rid of a number of problems. For example, there were some flash reflections in the ceiling, and this flash bouncing off the mirrors over here. This hot spot was from that bounced alien bee in the corner. You can clean that up real nicely. So we'll clean up with that nice ambient ceiling there, and this is a little bright, so I'm probably going to tone that down a bit with another frame. And let's see, we can go in, and I am just going to take out the 3 of us down here. There's me and Lee and Patrick, and all I'm going to do is, again, pen tool around that window and just trace it out nice and simple, 5 or 6 clicks all the way around. And make a path out of it and brush in the ambient layer right there. That gets rid of all of us. And then let's see, out here, this is a bit too heavy-handed on the flash. So I'm going to brush in some ambient at about
40% opacity, just to kind of tone that down a little bit. I kind of like that. That's kind of cool right there. That shadow kind of gives another dimension to it. Let's see, what else? I also like the ambient over here, hiding the flash reflection. So I'm going to brush some of that in just to tame that a little bit. And let's see, a little more ambient in there. As you can see, this ambient is really starting to give it a natural feel, less flashy, kind of a more soft, inviting look. I'm probably brushing a little bit down in here, just going through and clicking where I see fit. The window view doesn't really concern me here. It's just a big pink building. Let's see, there's my camera in the mirrors there. Let's see, that's looking good. I'm gonna brush a little bit out of there. I like the natural color of the floor that the flash gives us. You can see the power cord there. I'll have to clone that out in a minute. And then the next step here, after I've got this looking the way I want it, I'm gonna brush a little more ambient in. That shadow there is kind of bugging me. I'll replace that flash shadow with an entirely ambient shadow. You can see that this right here goes from, you know, a pretty bright, flashy shadow to a nice soft ambient shadow. And I'll do that around the rest of the room. So, okay, there is our combined layers, and now it's time to add in our server. Now remember, I wanted her to add a little bit of life and activity to the space, just because it's an empty restaurant is kind of you know, uninviting, and a full restaurant tends to get messy when it's full of, you know, paying customers and everything. You have no control over them. You don't know, you can't control their wardrobe, what they're wearing, what they're eating, what they're looking like. So we had a employee stand in for us, and I just absolutely loved her outfit and the way it fit with the mood of the room in the restaurant. And so she's got this cool flannel outfit going on. I think it adds a lot of authenticity to it. So I added her in, and it not only gives the feel of like a non-empty restaurant, like it's actually in business. She's getting ready to set up for a busy lunch period. So all I'm going to do is add her in. And to do that, again, my favorite tool here, the pen tool, I'm just going to go around and I will select all of her. I'm zooming in way here at like 200% now, and just select her entire body. Same as usual with the pen tool, get right in there, every nook and cranny. Be very careful when you're compositing in people, because if you miss a spot, someone will instantly be able to notice. So just take your time here and go around, getting each little bit all the way up. The way I introduced the model to the scene was I lit her using the flash frame. That way you get a nice, crisp, contrasty model. And since I know I'm going to be compositing it in later, I want as much definition to her as possible. If I shot her with ambient only, she might be some of her that's blown out from light hitting her, or she might move during a long exposure. I think our ambient frame was like 1/5 of a second. So I wanted a nice clean line around her. So I used the flash frame. I think the shutter speed was at like 1/60th or something, and the flash lit her right up, gave me a nice, easy edge to trace, and it made her kind of pop a bit. I wanted the real color of her clothing to come out. So using the flash frame when you're compositing in people will make it a lot easier. All right, so now that we have our pen path closed up, I'm going to go ahead and create a selection from it. And as usual, I'm going to hit Command or Control Enter. And there we have it. And as usual, what I'm going to do is hit Add Layer Mask, and that will put our server right on top of our scene. Just cut out like that, pretty perfectly. So as you can see, there's a little bit of an issue here. Like I said, things got bumped. Maybe she bumped it, maybe I bumped it, someone bumped it, but it's an easy fix. All that happened was the chair moved a little bit to the right or something in that frame, and it's a quick and easy fix. So all we're going to do is just create a new layer and rename it server cloning or something. And I'm just going to make a selection with the polygonal lasso tool here around the chair, and that will just pretty much cover what we're going to have to clone. So we'll go there with that. You can see we cut off some of her arm there. There's that. So I'm just going to grab this with the clone stamp tool and kind of gently fix that so that the chair looks nice and natural. And then I will do the same with the teapot here, or the water pot. And grab some of that and bring it down. So we get a nice even pot. And then same thing over here. Grab the lasso and just go right along the edge, up, and again, that will confine our cloning to the area we select. So I can kind of clone at will here and not worry about going over the edge, just like that. And I'll take her arm over, edge of the glass, and bring it down just a bit like that. Kind of clean that up so it looks less cloned. And I'm going to go in here and darken that line. All right, there we go. So if you zoom out, it looks pretty good. I'll make a new group to include all of that. So we'll call that server. And I'm going to put both of those layers in. So there's our server, and if you go and look, there's a little bit of edges that we could clean up. It looks fine down there. We did a good job. Around her hair, it's always a little awkward, so I'm going to add a mask to her hair, or to the group rather. And what I'm going to do is take a brush and make it soft, and I'll just brush in and out accordingly. A little bit of, there you go, you can see the mask there. I'll just go around at maybe 30% opacity, just kind of softening that edge so it looks more natural. I'll go right down there, and we'll get it nice and soft. Zoom in a bit, and kind of take off that edge. That's my lousy pen tooling job at work. There we go. Perfect. If you zoom out, you can see there's really no rough edge around our waitress. So that's that. I've added a little bit of a human element to it. And now the rest of the things that I'm going to do are pretty much just basic cloning. So I'm going to make a new layer, and I will call it clone. And for example, I've got this, power wire down here from our lights. I'm just going to go in with the clone tool and do some simple and quick cloning to kind of get that taken care of. We didn't have a power pack, so we had to use an extension cord. In a perfect world, we'd have the power pack, but unfortunately, couldn't make it. And I'll just go around all these chairs, kind of grab from different places here. And I've never, had a problem. You don't have to spend hours upon hours cloning this stuff, because when you view a picture from way out here, no one will ever be able to tell. So you can just go pretty quick. You don't have to agonize over this stuff. I mean, keep in mind right now I'm zoomed into like 350% or something, 304%. And unless we're on a billboard, no one's ever going to zoom in this far to see our perfect clone work. So don't fret if it's not exact. right, so I've cloned out most of the things that are gonna bug me. Now there's a couple things left for this image that I wanna go over real quick, and they're gonna be small little touches. Some people might say this is done, but there's a few things that bug me. So you might have noticed that when I was dealing with the server, you can actually see her back in here. But if you'll notice, when we zoom into, way in there, that some more F-Stoppers crew are back in there. So what I'm going to do is just quickly pen tool around her right here, just to make sure we have her in the mirror. And I will do my same little thing with the add layer mask to bring her in the mirror. It's just a small little touch that a lot of people might overlook, and in fact, I almost overlooked it, but caught it. But I just wanted to point out how these mirrors show absolutely everything, and I got to be pretty careful when I'm going in here not to include the camera crew in the mirrors there. So we'll go around her and mask her in the mirror. And all I'm going to do is enable that, and there's her outline, and I'll zoom out, and I'm just going to brush her in. Whoop, select the right layer mic, there we go, brush her in the mirror. So there we go, there we have her in the mirror without the camera crew back in there. And let's see, what else? Now this ceiling is pretty bright, there's a giant hotspot in there, and it kind of grabs the eye. I'm thinking I'm going to crop it like somewhere down here. But just in case, I'm going to run back into aperture, and I'm going to grab an ambient frame that is a little bit darker and open that up in Photoshop, and I will drag that over on top of our image so far, and I'm going to name that darker ambient. And what I'm going to do is drag that down, fill it with black, and just brush in some of that darker ceiling so we don't have that giant hotspot up there. My brush is at let's see, I'll probably go to, I'd say, 40% opacity on the brush and make it nice and soft. And just brush it in so that we get some of that darker ceiling, which doesn't grab our eye as quickly as that giant bright hotspot up there. So we still want it to be a little bit bright, but not so bright that it, your eye instantly goes to it and says, oh, something's wrong. So after that, let's see, there is our cloned out little fire extinguisher up there. I cloned out a light panel thing over here, and I got rid of my camera, the wire down there. I cloned out our server, getting ready in the front, and that about finishes the image. I'm just going to take a quick look and see if I can spot anything else. I don't see any glaring issues here. I got a nice, even, soft light throughout. Good ambient mixed with flash. The flash brings out the color. The ambient kind of brings out the inviting natural feel. And when you combine them, like I said, you get the best of both worlds. So you combine the flash, you get the great colors and contrast. You add in that ambient layer at a reduced opacity, and you kind of tame the flash. You bring in some nice, soft, glowing mood to it. And there you go, guys. That is our finished shot. The last thing I'm going to do, as usual, is Command or Control Alt Shift E. Flatten all to a new layer and drag over my vertical lines here. And I'm just going to double check that everything is nice and straight. And I can see that there's a little bit of skew in there, so I'm going to skew my verticals out just a bit and zoom in to make sure that we're looking good. And there we go. That looks pretty good to me. I would say that we are going to hit enter and confirm those changes. And I'm going to save that, and I will probably do a little bit of cropping and aperture, and here you can see the finished image. So the next shot we're going to do for Husk is a shot of their lounge. It's a really cool old space with a lot of character. It's a completely detached building, so it's got a bit of a different feel, but it's still really cool. Now I need to pick a focal length. As you can see here, 17 millimeters just looks a bit too wide. And like I mentioned earlier, when you shoot that wide, the things in the background get too small, the things in the foreground get too big. Next thing I'm going to do is throw on my 24 millimeter. So here's my first shot, and immediately I know that I really want to, again, retain this ambient feel. I don't want to flood it with light, but I do want to add some accent light and bring some mood to the room. So here I am, walking around, popping off flashes. I'm trying to add depth and contrast to the image, so I'm being sure to cover every possible angle. You don't want to overdo this, you just want to add little bits of light here and there. A little bit can go a long way to adding a lot of feel to an image. When I got to the back part of this room, there was some sunlight coming in the window, and I didn't really want that. It didn't really work with the gelled light, it didn't really help the ambience. I wasn't going for a natural kind of feel, I was just going for a more of a sexy mood light type of feel. So what I did was I scrimmed that window to block that intruding sunlight and lit it myself. Once again, I find having control over all the light in the image is integral to creating a compelling picture. What you really want to do here is make sure that you light everything from an oblique angle. You never want to light it straight on. By lighting from the side, the top, or at an angle, what you do is create shadows and depth. So what I've done is basically hit every object in this room with some bit of flash. I like to have the option in post to go back in and pick and choose what I want and how I want to light it. And like always, when I'm done lighting an image, I'll be sure to bracket. I want to do 2 stops under and 2 stops over from the base exposure to make sure I've covered all my bases and that I have great base exposures to work with in light.
All right, so here we are. We're going to start editing our lounge shot from Husk. And again, this is right across the street from the main dining area. It's a pretty cool detached little lounge with its own kind of decor. So here, let's take a look at the shot, and I'll break it down for you step by step. I'll show you all the problems and how we're going to overcome them. So first things first, as you just saw, I'm going to be lighting all of these chairs from many different angles in order to bring out some character, depth, shadow, that type of thing. And also, I want to make sure I rein in these windows. It's a little bit too blown out for me in this case. It's kind of a dark and moody room, so I want to keep that feel. And by bringing those windows under control and showing the view, it'll help accomplish that. So I've already lined up the entire image and all of the light spots. You've seen how I do that. It's the same technique for the most part, and there are a few small caveats that I want to show you. There's some more advanced, window masking in here to ensure that we get nice, sharp, clean window views. But for the most part, you've seen most of this, so we can fly right through it. I'll do the first few for you so you get a good idea, and then we'll be on our way. So here we go here. I'm just going to delete that layer mask, and I am going to set the blend mode to completely normal. So as you can see, this is my spot of light on that little puff right there. And what I'm going to do is grab my lasso, set the freehand lasso. I'm just hitting Shift-L there, or you can go to the drop-down box and feather of 20 pixels. I'm just going to go right around that. And I'm going to add layer mask right there. And then I'll change the blend mode to lighten. And it's the same thing for all of these other spots of light. So I can grab this one and do the same thing, add layer mask and blend mode to lighten. And as you can see, we're getting a very nice kind of soft fill light on those cups right there, which gives them a little definition and sparkle. And again, I've done it on the chair. Again, I can reset that so you can see what I've done. And I'll go to normal, and I'll just delete the layer mask, and I will go ahead and lasso that chair, create a layer mask on it, and change the blend mode to lighten. So all I'm doing here is kind of adding, some depth and highlights and shadows to all of the objects in the room. And it's the same technique that I've used on every chair. As you saw, I've got them all from multiple angles and try to cover all of the ground that I could. So I'm just going to go here and turn on all of these layers. I'll use the same exact technique, nothing crazy, just so you can see me build up the picture one by one. And there we go. You just saw me doing this on video, and now we're just doing it in Photoshop for you. So again, just to make these, you can just use a lasso and select the spot of light, and then you can just mask it right out, and that will leave you with nothing but that little spot of light. You go all the way through, getting those little ottomans back there, all the way up, and here's the walls and the little blackboard back there, some chairs over there, and then I made sure to get the hams as well. Those are kind of a neat little feature. They smelled horrible, by the way. So anyway, that's all of our lighting. Now, the real reason I'm going to show you this shot is because it uses a technique similar to the bedroom, but it's implemented in a slightly different way. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to turn on all of these window layers here, just so you can see the difference. And now, those are perfectly masked windows with no hint whatsoever that they have been masked in. And just like our bedroom, I'll show you exactly what I did. I'll go through here,
and delete these just so you can see it on a larger scale. And all I'm going to do is start out right here with this window, and I will show you what it looks like without it. And then all I'm going to do here is zoom in, and use me out of the way with the light, and I have underexposed the room and turned up the exposure on the flash just to ensure that I get crisp lines around the window, it's properly illuminated, and I can see exactly what I'm doing in post. So by bringing that exposure down, I've really isolated that window. So there's no other light falling on it. Nothing's going to make a really weird fuzz around the window shades or anything like that, or the lattices, sorry. So all I'm going to do here is zoom in, and I'll scroll up with my pen tool, and I'm just going to start clicking around the four corners of that window frame. 1, 2, and then I'll come down. 3, I will be sure to miss the edge of the couch there. And just come down and kind of pen tool right into there. Right along that edge. And all I'm going to do now is click Add Layer Mask. And there we are with our perfect window every time. So that is how that works, quick and simple. And now I'm going to do that for each of the windows in here. All right, so here's the last window. And just to recap how simple this is, you're going to lower the exposure of your interior and properly light the window frame with your flash. And once you have that in Photoshop, you can lay it over the image filled with ambient with the presumably blown out windows. And then all you're going to do is pen tool or lasso around the offending window. Get it nice and cut out just to where you want it. And then finish up your path with the pen tool or lasso. If you're using pen tool, hit Command Enter to create the selection, and just hit Add Layer Mask. And there you go. There is 5 perfect windows in the span of a few minutes. And then you'll notice a few other things with this picture that I want to point out. These chairs have gone from like a nice deep burgundy red to kind of a pink. And the way I'm going to fix that is all I'm going to do is add a new hue and saturation adjustment layer right here. And I'll open that up so you can see just what I've done. And all I do is I went to the reds and I just desaturated them a bit and I changed the hue. So I'll turn that layer on and you can see the effect that has. So if I turn that on and off, see this is like a way overdone pink. The CTO gel adds some orange into there along with that white light. And it just tends to turn all of these pink. So what I've done is remove some of the pinks. It's just a quick saturation. I desaturated them so they're not so loud. And then I turned the hue a little bit to the right just to kind of bring some of that deep red back. So it's a pretty quick and easy fix, and that's all I did there, just a quick desaturation. And I brushed it out where I didn't want it. So if I turn off that mask, you can see it's everywhere, but all I wanted is on the chairs. And then another thing I dealt with was the yellows over here. There was like a mismatched light bulb or something casting a light down on this right-hand side. So what I did was just opened up a hue and saturation, again, hue and saturation adjustment layer, and went down to the yellows, and I just played with that. And you can see it, you know, that's what it looked like. It was just this kind of green, yellow, ugly color. I just pulled that down a bit until it looked like it matched the rest of the room. And then, as usual, I brushed it out of everywhere else because I kind of like that natural warm feeling, but over here it was just too strong. Then the last thing I did was add a vignette, just to bring the attention into the room, kind of bring out some of that extraneous brightness and upper corners here, and it kind of gives it a bit of mood. So, and there is pretty much everything that I did. I'm going to do some quick cloning. I don't think that these, fire alarms add anything to the decor, so I'm just going to do some quick cloning here to remove that. And there you can see our shot from start to finish. Nice windows on all of them, nice sculpted light on all the chairs, and we've removed any of our extraneous things. So that's how we kind of take it from a, cool shot, but doesn't really fulfill all of its potential into something that's, a lot moodier. It really fits the mood of the space, and we didn't really have to do that much lighting. I mean, I did a bit on the chairs, but in terms of lighting the room itself, there wasn't too much to be done, so that's it. That's pretty much one of the faster high-end commercial shots that I've done as well for this DVD. It's pretty simple and straightforward. It's just a bit of light painting and then those quick 5 window masks, and that pretty much summed it all up. All right, so here we are. We're gonna get ready to create the Twilight exterior image. This is one of the most complicated pictures that I take. I'm gonna take it through every step of the way. Due to the complexity of these images, my goal is always to be ready with the tripod set up, all the gear ready to go, at least 1 full hour before sunset. That will let me make any necessary adjustments, iron out any last minute kinks, and make sure that I'm ready, because you only have 1 shot at this. Because there's so much that goes into each one of these images, you can only make 1 per night. Now, some people might think that's a little bit ridiculous, but I think the end result is totally worth it. When you combine ambient light with the existing light from the building and natural sunset light, you can get one amazing result. I want to talk a little bit about the composition. The composition was sort of dictated by this big tree right here, obviously the street in the middle. We got to let cars come in and out, and the client wanted us to make sure we included both buildings. If I shot a 1-point perspective from straight on, I wouldn't be able to get all of the detached bar. If I shot from over there, I would also miss the bar. So the composition is really dictated by all of those elements, and we're left with about a 6-foot radius here from which to choose. If you look at the composition, you can see that this tree actually creates a rather nice frame right over the building. We get all of the detached bar, all of the main restaurant, and all of the landscaping in the shot. We also have a little bit of street to play with in case we want to include elements like car trails or people walking through. Now the setup I have here is fairly simple in theory, but due to the nature of these shots, it actually gets pretty complicated. Because the camera alignment and registration are so critical over the 3-hour period that I'll be shooting these images, the camera cannot move at all. So once it's in place, any bump could ruin the entire image. You have to make sure you have a very sturdy tripod and that you have redundancy built in. You might be wondering why I have 2 pocket wizards on 1 camera. This is my initial trigger right here, which will fire the flash. In case that goes down, I also have this +3 for backup. So that means if one battery dies or my Cam Ranger trigger goes dead, I have a backup way to fire the camera without having to fiddle with the camera and risk moving it. For this shot, I am using that 17mm tilt shift. This is one of those rare occasions where we're backed up between 2 buildings, and if we were to shoot 24, we could get everything in, but we wouldn't have any space for cropping. And just in case I decide I want to play with extra sky or negative space, the 17mm will come in handy here. I also know that this image is going to be used in advertisements, promotions, and magazines for the restaurant, so I want to make sure that the client has a little bit of extra room to play with when they go to crop the image for their own needs. All right, so let's take a second here to talk about how I'm going to light this picture. What I have here is a monopod. Pretty much anyone will do. I know guys who use painter's poles with a little 1/4" 20 thread on there, but any monopod will do. I've got a Canon speed light right on here with a Pocket Wizard Flex as a trigger. Now what will happen is I'll take this light and I will walk around and add little pools of light to individual spots on the building to give it a kind of uplit effect. This is really what's going to set your images apart from everyone else's out there. I also want to point out that I've got a gel on here. A little bit of CTO will go a long way towards warming up the image. When we're already working with these warm tungsten lights, if I were to use the daylight balance flash, it would look a little cold. I've tried it in the past and it never really works out, so one hint for these twilight shots is to warm your flash up a little bit. I use anything from a 1/4 CTO and 1/8 CTO all the way to a full CTO depending on the color of the building. Here we have a white building, so I don't want to completely kill off that color, but I do want a little bit of warmth, so I've opted to go with just a 1/4 CTO. This is one of those things that you're going to want to play around with a bit and adjust to your own taste. There's no scientific method here or rhyme or reason. I just think it looks really good. Sometimes I'll use a quarter, sometimes I'll use a half, sometimes I'll use a full. So choose one at your own discretion. So let's take a minute and talk about some of the hurdles we have to overcome on this shoot. This is a super popular restaurant, and even though they're really excited to have us shoot it, they can't close down for the night for obvious reasons. So one of the big things we're gonna have to deal with is having people in the shot. And I think it'll come out pretty cool. I'm looking forward to it. I usually don't use people in the shot, but it will be a refreshing thing to have a little bit of life going on in the picture. It's gonna present some problems in Photoshop, but since I'm shooting so much and bracketing every minute, I'm pretty sure I'll be able to mask out images where I want people and where I don't want them. I'll show you some of that in Photoshop when we get to it. In addition to the light on a stick, I've also got a Lowell GL1. The difference is this is a short duration, high powered burst, while this is a long duration, low powered light. What this will let me do is take my time painting a large area of grass, shrubbery, or any other detail that is better served by a very even light over a large area, something a speed light really struggles with. You'll see how I use both. I'll wait until it's completely dark to use this because this has more trouble overpowering ambient light than the flash does. Okay, so here we are. We just finished shooting Husk, the exterior, and now what we're going to do is go into Photoshop, and I'm going to discuss, I'm not going to show you all the details of how I shot it. I've already taught you how I use my laser masking, how I use my different, Photoshop techniques to put one of these together, but the difference between this shoot and the exterior of the home we did was that there's a lot more going on in the shot. There's a lot of human activity, people walking around, a lot of challenges to overcome. It was such a more complex shot for a number of reasons, and I'm going to get into each and every one of those, but there are so many things here that are working against us as we shot this. So I'm going to take you into Photoshop. I'm going to show you how we got around all those problems and how we came out with a pretty awesome shot and the client was very thrilled with. So before we start, I want to show you the finished image next to an automatic HDR image. Now this is what most people would get out of Photomatix or a similar automated program. And you can see that there's just really no way to get the effect that I get using only ambient frames. Adding light and adding Photoshop and breaking an image down gives you so many more options to make such a better image. And I think it's really apparent in this example. All right, so here is our base image. Now, as you'll notice, there are a bunch of people over here. There's another restaurant next door to Husk, which are these two buildings right here, which is what we're shooting for our client. So we have to somehow make these guys look really good. We've got to disregard all these people or find a way to get them to go away. And we also noticed that about 3/4 of the way through our shoot, another crew decided that they wanted to show up unannounced and do a photo shoot there. It was apparently a big, Food Network or something shoot, and they were not clear with their intentions, so they double booked us on the same day. And the manager came out all, sorry, we didn't know, but we had to deal with it. And so we were fighting over real estate here. So what happened was this shoot was there, and they would not move for us. They were being really stubborn. We were trying to be accommodating, but I digress. So we had to deal with them. So I'll tell you how we got through all that just in a minute. But as usual, the first thing I'm going to do is get my whole light on a stick technique going, and I will walk you through that. And as you can see over here, this is quite an enormous file. There's a lot to get through. So let's just start with the basics. And just like my shoot at the house, I am going to go through and light it step by step. So as you can see here, it's the same old technique. This is the light on a stick. I'll turn the mask off so you can see what's going on here. There I'm actually standing on that little pillar to get the light way up there. And as usual, I'm going to change the blend mode to lighten, and I'm going to turn off my disabled mask so you can see exactly what I kept. If I zoom in, you can actually see the flash head. It was in the way of the light, so we'll have to deal with that later, of course, and there's these pretty ugly shadows that I'm going to have to fix too. So I did that for all of the building. The difference here and from the architectural home that we shot is that this has no real defining gables or eaves or any single architectural feature that we want to show off. So I opted to light it in a way that casts an even light over the entire building. So what I'm going to do is you'll see all these little speed light pops here. I'll turn off the mask there again and put that on normal so you can see there I am standing. I've got the light on a stick, and I'm just going across the top from right to left or left to right. I forget what it was, but I'm just lighting the entire building, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 pops to get everything evenly lit. And I do that for both the upstairs balcony here, and I do that for the downstairs as well. So the next thing that I do, I've got them all labeled here. So there's the rear upper area of the porch here getting lit, and then I do the lower porch, and I'll turn those lights on for you. Again, the same exact technique that I've used on all of these exteriors, all the exterior light flash pop techniques. So as you can see there's our lower part of the building lit, and then I'll go through and light the middle section here one at a time. 1, 2, 3, and then I'll get the upper section here. And as you can see, I'm just starting to fill in the building. I'll turn off what I've done so far. So you can see I got the 2 balconies there, and then I've got the porch and the lower section as well. So there's 4 groups just to get that all masked in. And then what I've got to do, of course, is light this building as well. I almost got so caught up shooting this that I almost forgot to light this, but finally snapped out of it and began lighting this as well. So here is the bar, and as usual, it's the same exact technique. And you can see how much it really comes to life. You get that great texture on the brick, and the color comes out very nicely when we start lighting that. And there it is again. We're getting a nice bit of glow up there. And again, same exact technique. I'll disable that so you can see everything, and I'll take the blend mode off of lighten. So you can see there I am lighting, I think I'm kneeling down here, lighting all that heading up. So I will continue on our way here, and I've got the bar lit, and I have the main restaurant lit. So what I'm going to do is light the trees. And in order to light the trees, I opted to not use a flash because there's so much ground to cover. And this was such a complicated tree here that I wanted to really light it as best as I could. Same goes for over here. So what I opted to do is take out a Lowell GL1, which is that flashlight I showed you earlier, and it's basically variable power, variable zoom, hot light that you can hold in one hand, no cables or anything, and that allows you to kind of wave it around and just paint light and add shadow and highlight and contrast and depth to all these different parts of the picture. So what I did is I took that on all the trees. Instead of using that flash, which is just a pop and you can't really tell where it's going, I can actually get in there and kind of like chisel out the light on the trees. So what I did was I lit, again, using that light on all these different parts of the tree, and that's just me kind of standing there casting my light around. I think you can see it in the video. And I did that for both the tree over here and the big tree over here. Now, one problem that I run into with that light is that it is not color balanced the same as the flash. So what I have to do is color balance those images separately. So everything I shoot with that flashlight gets a batch color balance adjustment before I take it into Photoshop. So I'll tab back to aperture here, and I'll show you. Here's one of the original files from the flashlight. Here's me standing down there. And if you zoom in here, you can see that this is a very, very warm light. So what I've done is in aperture, I have just brought it down to a daylight white balance, and it's still, you can see the entire image just goes way to blue. And but this tree looks nice and white. There's a little bit of warmth to it, which is fine with me. I like the warmth rather than, like I said, a very cool blue. I'd rather have the warm light balance where possible, but not so much that it kind of overwhelms. So I go back to Photoshop and I'm using these adjusted color balanced frames from the flashlight to fill in the tree. And as you can see, it's one piece at a time. I really did some painting in here. I can show you, I can turn off the layer mask and you can see how much I kind of sculpted that light. And I've also made a mask out of the entire group so that you can see, I'll turn it on at the end here. So I'll add all these up, all these layers, and we'll get to the top. And then if I turn that off, you can kind of see how much, even in post, I kind of sculpted the light, again, using a big soft brush to kind of bring some highlight and definition to it all. You can see it kind of leaked around everywhere. I had to clean that up. But that's just the nature of the flashlight. You can cover a lot more ground and get a lot more depth and detail because you can change the angle better than you can with the flash, but you kind of got to watch it when you do post with it because they can tend to get a little bit unruly. So that is all the lighting elements of the scene. And as you can see, it's looking okay. There's light. There's definitely light. This looks a lot better than it did a minute ago. I can turn all the lights off. But as you can see, there are quite a few problem areas still. Like we've got this pink cast up here. We've still got a pretty dull sky. And the image is just looking a little bit cold and lifeless at this point. The windows aren't really glowing yet. All right, so now that we have our lights, I'm going to go on. And it's at this point which I usually start thinking about putting my sky in. And I will show you what I've done here is I've used a sky. This is from about 15 or 20 minutes before we took our base exposure. I noticed that the sky was getting lit up real nicely pink. So I just bracketed a few frames exposing for the sky, knowing that I could take those later and add those into our final shot. So what I've done here is I've dragged one of those frames in with the nice pink sky, and I am going to show you how I mask that. It's the same exact technique that we used in the architectural home shoot a few chapters back. So I'll just walk you through that again in case you want to see that, how that works. What I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to turn off all of the lighting layers, and this will just help me pick out the sky a little bit better. That'll be easier to work with when I do my curves adjustments in the channel. So I'm going to go over to the channels here. I'm going to select the blue channel. I can get rid of all those guys. And what that does is it separates out all the colors very nicely into black and white so that when I make a channel selection or a selection of the channel, I'll be very easily able to mask and replace that white with our sky. So what I'm going to do is apply a curves layer to that. And what I can do is duplicate that layer. And I'll just say, I'll name that, test curves so you guys can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to apply curves by hitting Control Apple M, whichever operating system you're on. And I'm just going to make that, again, white sky, black foreground in plants, something like that. And I could tweak with it a little bit. And I'm going to come in here with a black brush and kind of just brush out all that white. And I can do this on and on and on. And then what I did, I went in with a pen tool and kind of cleaned it up a bit, like around in here. It got a little tricky. And after I pen tooled around all of these little details just to make a nice clean separation between black and white, I came back in and this was what our mask ended up looking like. So I took my pen tool and went along all these edges and cleaned it up nicely. And that's what we have for our sky mask. And then I will Command or Control click on that to make a selection. And that is what you see here. That selection I applied to this group. And that is how we got our sky. And as usual, it's the same technique. It works very well, quick and easy. And all I did from there was I added a little bit of curves to darken the sky and add some drama, just to make it a little more believable that it was a nighttime scene. So after that, we can turn our lights back on. And I started noticing at this point that there were some of these pink casts in here. Right on the roof, you can see it's very red. And over here, you can also see there's like a weird pink purple kind of thing going on. And actually, the more I thought about that, I realized that behind us, there was an enormous hotel. It's called the Mills House. And it's just a gigantic pink 5 or 6 story building. And everything had this kind of pink glow to it. And if you look at it in real life and during the daytime or even at night, the eye doesn't even notice it. But the camera really picked that up.
And so what I wanted to do was pull out that pink cast, because if you look at this, it's a white building and it's a nice brick building, and there's no pink in those bricks. There's no pink in the white. It's just a solid white facade there. So what I did was I went back and as you can see here, I just removed the pinks with the little adjustment layer. This is a hue and saturation adjustment layer. I went in and went to the magentas, I believe, yeah, and I just pulled the saturation all the way out. There you can go. There you can see how I did that. I just dragged that all the way down, and that got rid of all those pinks in that building there. But now it's looking a little cold because there was some warmth involved in that pink cast, but we'll get that fixed in 1 second. Now, if you notice, this adjustment layer is buried underneath all of these lighting layers, and it's underneath the sky as well. Now, what will happen if I were to put that above the sky layer? Well, that would not only suck the pink out of here, but also out of the sky. You can see how that affects it. So make sure that when you're adding an adjustment layer, you add it underneath whatever you want to stay pink or warm or so on, so that it doesn't affect things above it. So I'm going to bring that back down to where it was, right there, underneath everything. And as you can see, I'm going to minimize these lighting layers so they don't confuse us. All right, and we've gone that far. So now the next thing, as I mentioned a second ago, is that it's feeling a little bit cold and dark. There's no real inviting warmth to it. And this is a restaurant, so we want to make it seem like, you know, it's warm inside, it's inviting. You want to go here, get some food, and warm up, whatever it is. Even though it's Charleston, it's 100 degrees. No one likes that cold blue steel feel. All right, so what I'm going to do here is just pull down the blues with the saturation and lightness sliders all the way. Same thing with the cyans. And what that's going to do is take out the blues and the cyans, and it's going to bring down the density of those colors. So they'll be a little bit darker, and it'll kind of add to that warm effect once I start warming it up. You'll see that in a second. So I'm going to turn that layer on, and what is going to happen is it's going to kind of kill the sky. So all I'm going to do here is just brush with a big, fat, soft brush it out of the sky, and that will bring us back to where we were. So that's quick and easy, warms the image up. As you can see, all the cold blue down here kind of went away, and it was it goes a long way to kind of just improving the feel of an image and adding in some warmth. So the next thing I'm going to do is, in addition to removing the blues, is same thing as the house shoot. What I'm going to do is add a little bit of warmth with a curves layer, and again I just bumped the reds very slightly, and the greens brought them down just a bit. Same with the blues. That takes out the blues and the greens, adds a little bit of red, kind of gives a nice warm inviting feel. As you can see here, it's just very slight, but it gives it a lot of life. It's just a tiny, tiny bit of adjustments in the curves, but what happens is that the whole image kind of goes from cold and uninviting to like warm and like a happening spot that you'd like to go to at night. So that's, again, the two things I did there is the hue and saturation layer and the curves layer. And after that, we're looking pretty good. It's starting to look like a finished picture here, but obviously, like I said, the one thing that people overlook is controlling the interior light. So this is a really complicated part of the shot, and I hope you can follow along without too much trouble. But what I had to do was I used 3 separate exposures spaced 1 stop apart to control that interior lighting. So what I did was, just like the house shot, I went around and I lassoed every single window. This took me about forever and a day. And all I did was create a mask, same as the house shot. So I'll just pen tool around every single window, every little piece of glass here, and I will make a selection with the 3 layers here. So I've got my selection, I'm going to apply it to a group, and then I've got 3 layers inside of it. And here is the first one. So this is my base exposure for my windows. Everything's going to be based off of that. The interior is, for the most part, pretty properly exposed. And over here, it's a little bit dark, but we can fix that. And over here, it's a little bit light, but we'll fix that as well. So I'll turn off that mask, and so you can see what that looks like. Here is just that exposure using, I'm only going to use the interior glow out of this exposure. I'm not going to use anything else. So I'll turn that off, and you can see what it looks like when it's masked in. So that's what the image looked like 1 second ago, and now I turn my interior lights on, and we've got that. So something that jumped right out at me that I instantly needed to fix was the warmth of those windows. Now, I like a warm, inviting image, but when you have this like nuclear
glow here of this orange. I've never seen interior lights that were, bright orange like that. So what I'm going to do to fix these bright orange windows is to add a hue and saturation adjustment layer, which is right there in the layers palette. And what that hue and saturation adjustment layer is going to do is allow me to desaturate and alter the color balance of these windows. Now remember that this layer is inside of my interior lights group. So when I do that here, because this group is masked, as you can see right there, it's only going to affect things within that dotted line. So I'll go back to it and I'll turn that on. And as you can see, what I did was I brought it down from that crazy orange into a more inviting yellow. And all I did was go into here into saturation, and I just brought the saturation down a bit. I played with the hue a little bit. You can get a little bit crazy with this, but I didn't need to go too wild on it. Just right to there is all I needed. And it was just desaturation, and I played with the hue. And then after that, so my windows are looking a lot better, but this is still very, very blown out. And these are a little too dark for my taste. I want people to be able to see the detail in through those windows. So what I've done is I've taken two other exposures. Like I said, I bracketed. So I've got a properly exposed interior, one that's darker and one that's brighter. And I am going to turn on the darker exposure so you can see. Everything here goes dark, but this one is about where it should be at this point. So if I turn that off again, you can see here it's way overexposed. If I turn on this darker exposure, it's perfectly exposed. So what I'm going to do is apply a mask to that. And all I did was I brushed in that darker window, just like I did with the house, and the same thing over here. I'll turn that on, and that was for the bar area to bring those windows up. So all of the windows now are pretty evenly exposed across the two buildings, and it's a lot of work, and it took a good half an hour to an hour to get that just right. But it really, really lifts the image. Like this is, I mean, it looks pretty cool, but the lights are all off, and it's kind of lifeless as a result. So as soon as we turn on those windows, the whole image just really starts to come to life. And that's, like I said, the most pivotal thing that people overlook. They paint light and they replace the sky and it still looks a little bit dead. It's because they forgot to do the windows. So kind of an annoying thing. It takes a while. Like I said, you got to go around and do each individual window frame. But that is what's really going to lift your image and make it look amazing. So after I've got my interior lights on, my picture's starting to look pretty good. As you can see, there's a bit of this guy left over here. I painted the light and masked that in. It got rid of about half of them. And there's still some bystanders over here. And up here, I thought that was a little bit dark. Remember, I was trying to evenly light across the top. It looks like my flash couldn't reach all the way to those far corners. So what I did was I made a dodge and burn layer. And again, that's just Alt-click on the new layer mask button, or sorry, new layer button, and just change the mode to overlay. And you fill it with an overlay neutral color. And then you can name it dodge and burn or whatever. And all you do is take a brush and you can brush in or out. So what I did there was I just did this really quickly to kind of bring up some of the exposure on the top of the building where the flash couldn't reach all the way. And that's what it looked like when I was done. I also did a little bit on the trees down here because I kind of had a tough time lighting those. So what I did in lieu of that was just dodged and burned them. And I didn't think they needed that much light because we've already done all this and we didn't want to get confusing and have such a busy picture. So I just did a little bit of dodge and burn on them to make it known that there were trees down there. I didn't need to go crazy with sculpting them with light. So after that, we're starting to get there. We're almost there, I would say. But still, I like perfection and I can't have this half of a man down here. I don't like all these people. I don't like all the leaves and debris down in front. So what I'm going to do is go in, and the way I took care of this was by, I'm just going to turn everything off so you can see. I went back into aperture and found another frame where there were no people over here. And it happened that it was very late at night, pretty much after that line had subsided and everyone had been seated. And all I did was I brushed in that frame. So what I did was I took a brush here, and I can brush it out and in so you can see. And there I can get rid of that, or I can add it back in. And it also has the bonus of kind of cleaning up some of that leftover blue down here, because that was shot so late at night. There's not really too much blue from the sky reflecting on the street. So that got rid of the people and warmed up the bottom of our image. And then after that was done, let me turn all this stuff back on. we're really almost there. We got rid of our people. We've got a fire hydrant to clone out. I hate this, just what we should have done here, but I didn't speak up because I'm shy. But anyway, what I should have done is went inside and got a broom and cleaned off this entire front sidewalk, because I just figured, we were busy, I'm sweating, I'm running around jumping, we've had so much to deal with, I don't need to go bug them for a broom. But I saw this and I thought about it and I neglected to do it. I should have cleaned off all those leaves, because the image looks pretty great as of right now. Some people might say it's done, but those leaves are just like an ugly scar on this picture. So what I had to do was go in and I cloned out every little leaf down there. And you can see how there's just all these different layers of where I went in and I took care of all those little leaves and all of that. And you can see that there's some leftover splotches, and I'll get to that in 1 second. What happened was, when you put the clone layer back in without putting these adjustment layers, those show up. So I can finish here. I added this ambient glow because without it, up here looks a little gray and dull. And what that is I'll turn off all this stuff again for you. This ambient glow layer is just an exposure from pretty much the end of the shoot, where I let the shutter open for like 30 seconds and just let the ambient light overpower the image. It's a little bit blown out in places, but if you add that orange glow back in, it can also go a bit further to giving some life to the picture. So what I'm doing is just brushing back in some of these ambient existing lights on the upper interior of the porch here. So I'll turn that mask on, and as you can see, it's just a bit right there where you'd expect there to be some warm lighting. And then I'll add in all these again so you can see where we're going. And then I added a bit of a vignette because I want the viewer's eye to focus on these two buildings. And I'll go one step further with the vignette. I wasn't quite satisfied. I thought there should be more. And then if I turn my clone layer back on, you can't see those splotches, because that vignette was kind of obscuring some of them down there. And I cloned with the vignette on. Like I don't think I should have done that, but either way, once we turn that back on, you can see how they disappear. And so the last thing I did was add even more of a vignette, because I think this building adds nothing to our picture. The sidewalk, or the street, sorry, adds nothing. And this over here, we're not advertising for them, so there's no need to show that building. So what I'm going to do, after all that is done, I'll turn it on and off so you can see. And I cloned out the fire hydrant. I got rid of the guy down there with that layer. You can see all those people just clean up. And then I add my vignette, and I will drag in my verticals, as you've seen me do so many times. And I will just Command, Control, Option, Shift E, and flatten to a new layer. And then I'll skew that over, and you know how I do that. I just drag and skew, and that will be the finished picture after I'm done skewing right there, and I'll hide the rulers so you can see. So that is it, guys. That wraps it up. There it is again, from beginning to end. You can see everything that went into that shot, all the lighting, all the flash lighting, all of the interior glow, and the window masking and the sky replacements. That's everything right there. I hope that answers any questions you have about these more complicated images. So here we are at McCrady's, one of Charleston's most well-known restaurants, and it's a very cool space. As you can see behind me, there's tons of things going on. Lots of history here. Over 100 years ago, this used to be an entirely different space. This was outside. This was the front facade of another building, and what they've done is combine the two of them to make this bar restaurant. Very neat, lots of history, as I said. The first shot that we're taking today is actually very exciting because there's a lot going on. It's not like we're just shooting one room or one space. We're shooting multiple spaces with multiple lighting challenges to overcome. So there's a few challenges that we're gonna have to overcome to make this a successful shot. First of all, we're shooting 3 different spaces in one image. We've got the bar, we have these arches with the dining alcoves underneath, and we've got the main dining area over here. In addition to the 3 different rooms in one image, there's also 3 different types of light. We've got this natural overhead soft diffuse light for the bar, an overhead tungsten lighting for the alcoves, and a completely dark tungsten and fluorescent combo for this dining area over here.
3 different moods, 3 different rooms, 1 picture. The first thing I did when I came here was just walk around and take snapshots, trying to figure out the best composition. There's a lot going on. I didn't want to shoot from behind the bar because you could see all of the tools and kitchenware that they need to get set up, and it's kind of ugly in a picture. Nobody really wants to see the back of a bar and sinks and metal and all that kind of stuff. If you go over here, you lose this really cool architectural feature. It's a big part of the building. It's very historical. It's been here forever, and they really wanted to feature this. If I shoot from that way, again, you can't see behind the camera, but there's not a whole lot going on, and it kind of looks like a bowling alley. You've got a long, wide open space, and I try to avoid those bowling alley shots because they just draw the eye right through the image, and it's very hard to focus on one interesting thing. So I ended up shooting from a pretty awkward space. In order to shoot the bar, these arches, in the main dining area, I had to walk up the stairs and wedge my tripod between the banister back there, the stairs, and a table. So it was a pretty awkward place to be, but it really satisfied all the compositional needs of the image. So let's talk a little bit about how I decided to shoot this. In my opinion, the best way to go about this is to break it down into different rooms. And what I'm going to do is composite the 2 entirely different rooms together in Photoshop. Now, I think you could get it all in one shot, but personally, I think that would just be way too much work. You'd have to light all of this with a natural feel. You'd have to light this differently. There would be a lot going on. You'd at least use 10 lights to light this all in one shot. So what I'm going to do is just use 5 or 6 lights and break it down into manageable chunks. I'm going to light the bar, I'm going to light these alcoves, and then I'm going to light the main dining area. All right, so the first thing I'm going to take care of is lighting this bar area. Like I said, we've got this great, soft, natural light coming in, and I want to use that in the photo to convey the feeling of the bar. So how I'm going to do this, it's going to be pretty simple. I'm going to put a small light back there for fill on the underside of the bar so it's not completely dark and the shadows aren't entirely gone. And then what I'm going to do is let the soft natural light take care of this. So the first thing I'm going to do is find my exposure for the bar. And then I'm going to add a little light to bring out the details in the shadows. After I've got that set, I'm going to add light to these alcoves here. I don't know if you can see from there, but there's a nice tungsten light. It's a little bit warm. I'm going to replicate that. I just want to bring it up so the eye could see it, but the camera cannot. So all I'm going to do there is put a speed light with a full CTO gel on it to match those tungsten lights and bounce it up into the wooden alcove. The nice thing about these alcoves is that it's not that difficult to light them. I don't need to work to hide a speed light. I can just wedge them in there, bounce them up, it'll replicate that natural light, and add a little bit of highlight to the arches, which could be a cool compositional element. So just like you've seen me do a couple times, in particular, at the kitchen at the architectural home, I'm going to go through and light each chair individually with a speed light, a gel, and a grid. I'm doing that to add depth, dimensionality, and texture to each of these chairs. That kind of moody lighting really plays well with the moody lighting in here. Now, if you were here in person, you could see all the individual lights on each chair. Every table has a light coming down onto it, and all the paintings have lights on them as well. So in order to show that to the camera and make it come out in the final image, I'm going to have to go around one by one and take care of it by myself. There are some features back here that I really want to show off. I'm going to keep that in mind when I light it. I'm going to make sure that I light the fireplace, bring out the texture in the brick, show that big airy fireplace. I'm going to light the paintings. It's a great piece of art. I want to show that as well. I need to pay attention to the angle of the chairs, the staging, and so on. Now, as we were finishing up the shot, the client actually came down and said, whoa, 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 whoa. I want to see how it looks with the cups turned up. They had it staged for us, but on second thought, she changed her mind, wanted to do a little bit of editing to the scene, and we were able to take care of that for her because we were compositing it, and it's not a big deal to change that in post. Luckily, we hadn't moved the camera. All we had to do was flip all the glasses up as she wanted and take one more shot. It was a quick and easy fix, which could not have been done had you been trying to get this all in one shot. You'd have to come down and relight the whole thing. All right, so here we are downstairs at McCrady's now. They recently redid all their furnishings and wanted some updated shots for the website. So we went over there and scouted it, and we had a couple ideas for shots, but it turned out to be much trickier than we were expecting because it was a very, very fickle composition. We had to kind of navigate between 2.5 different rooms. There's the bar room and the dining room and behind the bar itself. So we got 3 whole areas to take into account for this one composition. They stood here and basically said, we want it shot from this part of the room. We want to show the bar, we want to show the dining area, and we want to show it all in one picture now. If this was 2 separate pictures, cakewalk, not very difficult at all. I'd be able to shoot the bar, natural light, shoot the interior, use some flashlight all together,
Pretty simple. But however, because the client wanted this shot from where they were standing, and there's two rooms with vastly different moods, it's going to be pretty complicated. And I think that this is the most complicated shot on the DVD. It may not look like it. You may think it's a Twilight or something, but I've done so many of those that it's just like clockwork to me now. So this one is a unique challenge. It's not something that I deal with very often at all. And I'm going to show you exactly how I pulled this off. I'm going to walk you through each layer. I'm not going to do the whole process from start to finish because you pretty much know how that works. You know how to add light and mask in light and change colors and all that. But there were some unique problems with this picture, and I'm going to show you what I did step by step. So let's dive in here and take a look. All right, so here is the finished image. And as you can see in here, we've got a lot of light painting going on, a lot of mood. And out here, there's almost no light painting. It's just pretty, airy and naturally lit, and it's not too difficult. It's a pretty straightforward shot. I shot most of this in camera and then just added a little bit of light after. So I'm going to turn off this layer, and you can see what we were working with. Now, this first shot here is lit with, I think there's 5 lights at play. It almost looks like a completely natural image, but I've got one light down here lighting the front of this bar, another light coming across the top to light these chairs, and then I have a light right in here bounced up lighting these guys here, and the same in this, and the same in this last arch down here. So that is going to form the base exposure for our picture. And then we will just start putting it together one step at a time. So the first thing that I did was I kind of changed the color balance of the base image. Something wasn't sitting quite right with me here. If you look over here, these purple chairs, they look a little brown. And so I instantly went in and changed the white balance. And I'm going to have 2 separate white balances for each room. As I change this white balance, this room goes very blue and cold, so I want to avoid that. So I'm going to take care of this room, and immediately I notice that I'm going to have to shoot this as if it were 2 separate rooms. So there's our color corrected over here base, and I've got this image as well, so you can see 2 different color balances immediately at play. After that, I immediately felt that the windows over here were far too bright. So what I did was I masked in a window exposure, as you've seen me do a few times. It's the same technique. I just took a lasso, went around each one, and kind of darken those windows so that that bright object in the left-hand side doesn't grab your eyes immediately. After that, I felt that there was a little bit too much, or one too many blown highlights up in this part of the image in that left corner. So what I did was I masked in another ambient layer that I bracketed from and just kind of reined in those highlights, there's detail throughout. And as you can see, our base image is kind of starting together. And then I had to deal with the right-hand side of the image. So I'll turn this on for you. And here's our light. This is about ISO 200 f8, and that's like 1.3 seconds or something. And this is like 1/15th or 1/20th. So it's just completely different. It's a 2 or 3 stop difference. And then what I did over here was I added, because it's so dark and in shadow right here, what I did was I added an ambient frame, which was even longer exposure. I think this was like 2 or 3 seconds, and I brushed back in some of that fireplace. I'll show you what it looks like if I were to take it out. So I'm just going to switch to black brush here and brush that out. And as you can see, it goes completely dark very fast. So I brushed in some of that. I did the same for the ceiling. I like the wooden beams, a nice detail up there. So I brushed that in with a longer exposure, just with a simple masking technique, everything I have done for you before in this tutorial. So after that, the first thing that I started to do was masking the chairs. Now, you saw me just a few minutes ago in the downstairs area there, lighting all of these, and this was somewhat of a lighting nightmare. I took, as you can see, over 20 flash pops to get this all done, and it was kind of a royal pain. But you got to do it. It's my thing. I light every angle of every chair, and it slowly comes to life. This is, of course, the technique that we know and love of just lassoing that light, hitting add layer mask, and changing the blend mode to lighten for every chair. So I did that there, and you can kind of see our room starting to come to life. It's come a long way, but obviously there's still a lot of problem areas. So after that, I've got all this lighting for the chairs. This is still a bit dark. I want to add some mood to this really cool wooden arch feature back here. So what I did was just add a few more flash highlights, 1, 2, and 3 to bring some life into that. And then I kind of went down on the opacity. I think it was at 78% there and 84% for that one, just to kind of ease up. If I went to 100, I'll show you, it's just a little bit too bright. So I'm going to kind of tone that down a bit and give it a more natural feel. So there's all of our lighting in that room. And I can turn that off, and you can see how much of an effect that has on bringing that room to life and giving it some separation and depth. Without that lighting, it's really muddy. And like I said, it took a while to light all those chairs, and then, again, a while to put it all together, but it really gives a lot of depth to that area. So after that, let's see what I had to do. This is a fire. I added in a quick fire. All I did was, I've got a little library of stock fires that I add in here. And the way I do that is by, I'll close the layer mask there. Here's my fire that I'm going to mask in. And what I do is I set this to screen. And what the screen blending mode does is it removes all of the black from an image. So this is our fire, and all that black background has instantly gone away. And then what I do is I go in with a brush and kind of mask it out here. I'll show you again. I can paint it out, I can paint it in. I'm just switching foreground and background colors and masking appropriately. And I kind of just ruined my fire there, so I'll back up a few steps and get back to where we were. But that's how I do my fires, pretty quick and easy. And I just be careful to go around, the fireplace objects here and make it look somewhat realistic. Then after that, I add a little bit of an ambient glow in there. That's my dodge and burn method with, again, a warm color. Pretty straightforward. And then after that, we get into the left-hand side. So we've got our right-hand side looking pretty good. And now I've got to go and light this left-hand side. So most of this image is lit, like I said, with ambient light and flash on the left-hand side here. So this is all pretty much one exposure with the exception of the windows. Now what I did, I felt that all of these chairs had lost detail and had gone pretty black when I was walking around on my iPad looking at it. So what I did was I, being me, added light to each of them, which again took a bit of extra time, but it really brings that whole area to life. Without it, it doesn't really do anything for me. And it still keeps a natural feel. This isn't very heavy-handed lighting. It's just pretty soft. I think I used a softbox and a gel just to keep it warm and light. I could have gone crazy with it, but I don't think it really called for it. I just wanted the viewer to see detail on the chairs. Mission accomplished. So again, I'll turn that off and turn it back on so you can see exactly what happened. And then again, I lit these chairs across the bar, but once I got back to the computer, I saw that these chairs were dark, and I asked some of the guys over here for some feedback, and they agreed. So all I did to fix that was just add a little bit of dodging to bring up some light on those chairs, so everything is evenly lit across the bar. Again, not crazy casino-style lighting over here, just some fill light from dodge and burn. And then starting to get close to the finish line here, and I look in here and I see a lot of blue. And that cold, uninviting blue isn't really appealing to me. So what I did was I added a curves layer and removed the blues. This is pretty much the same curves layer that we used in our Twilight exterior. All I did was bump the reds, pull out the greens just slightly, and pull out the blues a little bit more. And that blend mode is just set to normal. And nothing crazy going on there, but again, that's just a little touch that kind of warms the image and gives it a bit of a natural feel. Now you'll notice that I did not continue that into the right-hand room. I felt that after I sucked all the blues out of here, this was far, far too blue for my liking. So I masked it out just using the standard old layer mask, and I can brush it back in if I want. And you can see how it warms up, but I like it gone. So I'm just gonna make sure that I keep that masked out and keep the color balance correct the way I had it in there. So there's my quick, warming up of that left-hand side, and it really kind of gives a nice pleasant mix in color between natural daylight and that warm glow from these tungsten bar lights. And then here's where it gets really tricky. So we had just shot this entire scene, and we showed up, it was staged perfectly. We talked to the manager and the owner, and they said, it's good to go. We like how it looks, go ahead and shoot it. And they went off, and we spent our hour setting up and getting it shot and lit and all that. And then all of a sudden, the manager comes down to check on us, and we're just kind of making small talk, and you tell her we're about to wrap it up. At this point, I was just doing my final 5 bracketed images to cover my my bases here. And so we're over here, kind of chatting, and she looks at the tables and she says, oh my God, crisis. And I'm like, oh God, what happened? And she says, we can't shoot it like this. All of the glasses have to be flipped back upright. I guess whoever staged it didn't get the memo and had all the glasses turned upside down. And now I look at this picture and I honestly don't think it's a big deal, but she was, insistent that we turned all the glasses back upright. And I had two options at this point. We're in a time crunch here, so we've got, 3 hours to make 3 pictures, and we've got a schedule to stick to, and we've got this room done. We've got to shoot the upstairs. So what we do is I tell her, okay, flip all the cups over, and I will do my best to composite them back in. I thought, would I have to shoot the entire thing? And that would be the best way to do it. If I wanted to shoot it again with the cups up, like I've said so many times, nothing can move once you start shooting. Tripods, chairs, cups, glasses, couches, whatever, it can't move. But she was insistent that the cups be up. So I said, all right, we'll see what I can do. I can't make a promise, but I'll do my best. So go ahead and restage it with the cups turned up. Be very careful not to touch any of the couches or the drapery or whatever. Just don't touch anything. Just take the glasses, flip them over. So we all did that. And what I ended up doing to fix that was I bracketed again my 5 exposure. I didn't relight the entire image because I didn't have another hour to kill. So what I did was I bracketed the exposures again. And here we are. If I turn off everything, except, let's see, I'll turn off all these guys, and I will turn off all these guys. And you can see here is my, bracketed exposure for the cups. And so I turn that on and off. You can see, I'll zoom in for you. The cups turn up, they turn down. This was before. Then the manager came down and said, oh my God, we've got to put the cups up. So what I'm going to do is mask in that exposure with the cups flipped upright. So I'm going to turn everything back on here, except for here's my layer. I named it Flip Cup because it was pretty much a very complicated, high-stakes game of Flip Cup. And I'm going to show you how I masked in all those cups. So if something colossally bad like this happens. This is unheard of. I've never had this happen on a shoot. I've never had an entire thing staged and at the last minute the client come down and say, we need to do it this way. And I'd already spent an hour in there getting it set up and staged and the composition set and lit. So here's what I did. I have my layer here with the glasses turned upright. And what I did was I went in and I created a layer mask here. And all I did was, I'm going to duplicate this and show you exactly what I did. I'll turn this one off, and I'll delete this layer mask. So here we are. What I did was I created a new mask and filled it with black, as usual. And what I did was I masked back in those glasses that were right side up. And I went all over the image. And I did this. And as you can see, as I'm doing this, a number of problems come up. Sure, the glasses are flipped back upright, but you'll see that it's painting over the painted light there. And here's another one. See, this shadow is upside down, but these glasses are right side up. And again, there it is. There's a bunch over there. So as I reveal these glasses that are turned upright, a bunch of problems crop up that I hadn't foreseen. So what I had to do was go in, and I took a pen tool and went around each individual now upright glass, like such, and made a selection. And then I went and made a clone layer here. I'll do it again so you can see. And I cloned in, and I made a mask a little bit tighter. Let's see if I can get away with this. Yeah, there's my tighter mask. But see, I've got that, the glass stem and bottom still up right there. So what I'm going to do is clone. I'm just going to grab some of this purple chair and clone it in right over that. Oh, I'm messing it up. You can see that down there. And this took me about, 20 minutes to fix. It was kind of painstaking, but I did that for every cup. And again, like over here, you can see this. I had to go in and mask that back out, being careful not to reveal the layer with the glasses upside down. And there it is again. Careful, careful, careful. And over here. And like what I did for this shadow was I just got rid of it entirely because there's no way to turn that shadow upright and not lose my mind. So what I did was I just took a selection there and cloned that guy out. Pretty simple and straightforward. I didn't go nuts because it's really a small part of the image here. So when all was said and done, I think it turned out pretty well. There's a few problems that I still see that I'm not in love with, and that is the fact that you can't see through the glasses that have been turned upright. Because I didn't relight the backs of the chairs, you're going to have to live with that. And I personally am not too bothered by it. If you zoom out, you can't really tell. And I'll deliver both just so they have the option. But you can see, the glasses rather go a little bit dark, like right in here when there's no light behind them. But like I said, I didn't want to spend an hour relighting the entire scene. So given the circumstances, I'm pretty happy with the way this turned out. That last minute change was kind of a nightmare, and I've never had anything that big happen at the very end of shoot. So having the glasses turned upside down didn't really bother me at all, but since the client came in at the last second and said we need those turned upright, if I hadn't done that, or at least gave an attempt, they would always have remembered me as the guy who didn't deliver what they asked. And now that even though I got those glasses turned upright, I told them I couldn't reshoot the entire picture, but I'll do my best. They have the option, they have the image that they want, and they'll think, if someone comes to them looking for a photographer, they say, hey, we love your images. Who shot them? Oh, Mike Kelley shot them. He did a great job, went the extra mile. They asked for it, he delivered it, it's all set. So it's one of those things that's going to take an extra 20 minutes, but if you want to make your clients happy, you have got to get that done and go the extra mile for them. And having all these tools in your bag available to you and being able to alter things after the capture is just such an important part of what I do, and here it really paid off. So keep that in mind when you're doing this. It might be a lot of work, but when you can do something like that, you make your clients really happy.
All right, so here we are upstairs at McCrady's. This is called the Long Room. It's very historical. It was built in the 1770s, and George Washington himself actually ate here. If you look around, you can see a lot of cool things. We have these awesome Venetian chandeliers, this great wallpaper. The whole room has a real bright and airy feel, but at the same time, it's also historical. When compared to downstairs, it's a lot brighter, airier. We want to light it in that style. Whereas downstairs, we were lighting in a very heavy-handed, moody way. Up here, it's going to be a much simpler process. The first thing I did when I came in here was find my composition, and like I said, that was going to be dead center in the back of the room. I want to show the size of the hall and the grandeur of the whole thing. I also want to be able to show the great natural lighting in here. So if you're going to have a breakfast or lunch function, you know what you're going to get. The client gave me a couple guidelines, but other than that, she said I was free to shoot it as I pleased. So I found my composition and took a few test shots. And there were a couple things that jumped out at me that needed to be fixed. We had to do a little bit of staging. We rearranged the tables just slightly, rearranged the chairs, pulled some chairs out, added some chairs in. There were a couple windows over here. The shutters had been pulled closed, and so we had to open those up and get some of that soft natural light in here. It's kind of a half cloudy day, so the natural light is really going to help us out. I also made sure to turn all the lights on. I like the little bit of a golden glow when I'm shooting an interior like this, especially when it's a place that's open for business. You're going to see how it looks when you're renting out the space. So let's talk about lighting the space. Unlike downstairs, where it was really heavy and dark and there was a lot of mood lighting, up here it's bright and airy, so the lighting's going to be pretty simple and straightforward. I want to retain the feel of the room, as always. So what I'm going to do is a pretty simple lighting setup that I can use when I'm faced with a situation like this. When you can't hide the lights anywhere, but you have to light it, you have to do a little bit of compositing in Photoshop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one light, in this case an Einstein, because I like the extra power, and I'm just going to go walk down each side of the room, popping off the light over each table, bouncing it across the room, and I'll composite that together in Photoshop. You could use a speed light. We did some tests, and we were about at ISO 800 f8, so that's a little higher than I would like to go when I'm doing a big commercial shoot like this. With the Einstein, we could get away with ISO 200 f9, and it was easy. The thing handles it with no problem at all. So let's go into Photoshop, and I'll show you how I put this all together.
All right, so let's start our Photoshop process for our upstairs image at McCrady's. So the goal here is really to just take an image that is timeless. I don't want the lighting to call attention to itself, but I want it to show off the space and still in a really good way. So what I'm going to do is use a pretty subdued lighting technique, and you'll also learn how to light a space where you can't hide any lights, but you need to get some light in there. So here we are in Aperture, and you can see here I am. You just saw me on video, but here I am again, going up and down either side with my flash. And there again on the right, and I think I went up and down the left, and I'm not going to end up using all of them, but here's some ambient images as well. So what I've done is I've loaded these into Photoshop, and we can switch over. And here we are with our ambient base image that we're going to build on top of. So I chose this base image because it's got detail in all the highlights that I want to keep. I don't really care about the windows. There's no view out there. And I'd prefer to keep it bright just for, sort of the feel that I'm going for in the room. I don't need anything outside to influence what's inside. So I let them go. It's not that important to keep those completely intact. So here I'm going to walk you through the layers in the image. First we have our flash right here. It's me aiming right to left. And if I hide that and go back to the ambient, there's another ambient layer in here. And there's a bunch of me just walking around with the flash. And what you'll see is that I am generally only going to use little bits of each of these. See, what I have over here is I'm aiming this light up from left to right, and I'm bouncing the light into the ceiling, and I'm going to use this image to light these tables. So I'm not flashing these tables. What I'm really concerned with is that the light goes up, becomes soft, and bounces down over here for a nice bit of pleasing fill. And you can see how much of a difference that's going to make once we start adding them in. The true white colors come out, and you get rid of this kind of ugly haze and this dark, yellow cast down here, which will be completely killed when we start adding our lights. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn off all the layers except the base. And I am just going to start with adding some flash. So here we are. This is the first flash shot that I took. I believe I was standing over here on the left, and I shot it directly up from the left into the right and bounced it down over here. So what I'm going to do is, as usual, add a layer mask, and I'm going to fill it with black. And what I'm going to do is start painting in the light on the right-hand side of the image. So I'm going to switch my palette here, the foreground, to white so I can paint in, and change the blend mode to lighten as usual. So what I'm going to do is go to, let's say, 50% opacity on my brush. Again, it's a big and hard brush, big soft brush rather. And I'm just going to gently paint in the light that came from the left and is now landing on the right side of the image. And as you can see, it's sort of lifting those shadows in the foreground. Here's what it was before, and that's now what it is. So as you can see, it's super subtle, but it's all you really need. And then I'm going to do it again. Same thing from the left to the right, and I'm going to add a mask, fill it with black, put it on lighten mode, and blend in. And as you can see, I'm just going very gentle with this. I don't need a ton of light. It's just enough. I don't want to blow the tabletops out. I want to keep detail all throughout there. And I'm going to zoom back out, and you can see what we've done so far. And it is a little thing that makes a huge difference. So I'm just going to keep going around, and here we go. Now we're going to go from here up to here, and I will mask that in, normal, lighten blend mode. Same thing, painting it in, just a little bit of fill. Up the walls, I'll probably bring it down a bit in opacity, and just continue painting into taste. I don't want to completely kill the ambient feel, so I'm going very gentle on these. And now I can do from right to left. And it's the same process. You can see here, we actually moved the chairs because I wasn't loving how they were coming out as we were shooting it. That little fold in the cloth was bothering me. So I moved the chairs, and it doesn't have any effect on the final image because I made sure to bracket again after I moved those chairs so that I could light and it would match up just perfectly. So here now I'm going to paint in the left-hand side. Again, 50% opacity, big soft brush, and I'll just bring that in, give it some fill light down there, up on these walls. I'll go down in opacity a little bit. And that's a little bright. I'm thinking 30% there is all we need. And the last thing I'm going to do is go from right to left and fill up here. So I'll add a layer mask, fill it with black, change the blend mode to lighten. And lastly, continue painting in some light, just very faintly. Like I said, a little bit is all we're going to need. And let's see, and now we can take a look and see where we've come from, and we can turn off all of these. And there you can see there's our ambient and there's our flash lit image. And the flash isn't really doing that much, but it's really starting to bring the picture to life and making it a bit more believable. As you can see, without the flash, like I mentioned, it's just ugly, gray, yellow, and completely underexposed in the foreground. And with the flash, it really fills the image out. And again, what I'm going to do here is I've got this ambient frame down below. I'll bring it to the top so you can see it. And I'll turn that on. And I'm thinking I'm going to brush in some of this ambient frame just to bring the ceiling up a little bit brighter and some of this wallpaper. I really like the pattern. I like how it looks in the ambient. So what I'm going to do is, as usual, add a layer mask, fill it with black, and I'm just going to kind of paint it in as I see fit, up in the ceiling and in the chandelier and kind of up in there. And that, I'm only at 50% opacity. I don't even think I need that much. I'm probably going to paint some of that out. Let's see, there we go. Just going around to taste, making sure those colors look correct. Kind of an off yellow sort of color. There's our ambient frame that we started with again. So as we're working on this picture, I just want to take another minute here and remind you of how important the ambient lighting is. And they can add so much to a space. Like just this ceiling, for example, and this great wallpaper, it's lit by the ambient light. It's got a great feel. And it looks really good in person. So keep that in mind. If something looks good in person, it's probably going to look good to the camera. So I can just blend that ambient. I don't need to try to lift it if it's kind of, I mean, like, you could try to light that ceiling and the molding on the edges there, but there's no real need to. And I mean, it's already got a great ambient feel. You can just mask it in. You don't need to go crazy and try to overlight it and kill the space. So if it looks good, don't be afraid to use it. I mean, you don't have to, even if you did light it, but it looks better as the ambient is, just feel free to use the ambient. Don't try to make something out of nothing, so to say. And let's see how we're doing here. It's looking pretty good to me. I think, I'm just taking a quick look around, and again, I'll turn everything off and on again and see how far we've come. And guys, that's looking pretty good. So what I'm going to do is, I'm not even going to add any contrast or anything. I like how it's feeling right now. Pretty bright and airy and gentle, and it's not overlit, not underlit. So what I'm going to do is drag in my rulers, and I'm going to level everything off. And I'll zoom in to check my accuracy here. Looks like I could go a little bit to the right, and that could go in as well. All right, so what I'm going to do is just Command Option Shift E and flatten all to a new layer. I'm going to free transform and then skew. And what I'm going to do is just pull that out a little smidge and zoom in. And that looks like it's straight right there, and that also looks good. So we can hit enter, and there is our finished image. And I'm going to save that, and there you have it. All right, so let me just take a minute here, and I want to talk about the reason I shot this image the way I did, and really the reason I shoot a lot of images the way I do. And that is, it's paying attention to the space and the needs of the client. Now, I've learned a lot. I've shot a lot of images, and all of them different, but there's one thing that I've learned, and that really is you've got to pay attention to how you're shooting it, and not only that, but why you're shooting it that way. So for this image, it's a really simple space, and there might have been a time when I would come in here and I would light every single chair with that dramatic, crazy lighting, And I would, go and spend hours and hours in Photoshop, and the client might be like, oh, well, I mean, it's not really, it's cool, but it doesn't really convey the space. So one thing I really want to, make clear is that it's important to get a feel for the space and try to convey that in the picture. For this shot, I mean, we really got away with not overlighting it. We didn't spend that much time on location, nor that much time in post, but the image is really great. And I think it's a successful image for the reason that we didn't completely lose the feel of the space. So it's just some quick lighting. I blended in the ambient. I love the way the ambient light comes in there. It's such a big part of the image. And it's really like, it's creating a timeless image that the client can use for a long period of time for many different uses. So if I were to come in here and light this like crazy, that would have a very specific usage to them. But an image like this, they can use for so many different things. And that is really what is going to make a successful image, is paying attention to the mood of the room, the needs of the client, and applying your techniques to that. So be aware of that kind of thing. And as you're doing post or on location, just try to keep it in the back of your head. Hey everyone, so it's Mike here. I hope you enjoyed that. It took a ton of time and effort, and we went and shot and edited and did Photoshop and filmed, and we did all of it again and over and overdubbing, and there was a ton of work that went into it. So I really hope that you found it informative and you learned a whole lot from it. I'm actually out here on a job right now in California, and I got a phone call from Lee and Patrick. They're freaking out, and they say, we forgot to film a closer. We need you to record something. So I didn't really want to end this on an iPhone, but we forgot to do this, and I really just wanted to say thank you to you guys who purchased this and who are interested in architectural photography. I absolutely love it and think it's the coolest thing. And I hope that you can take the techniques that you've learned and integrate them into your own photography and improve your own photography with the techniques we've gone over. Good luck, and I'd love to hear from you as well. If you've got any questions or feedback, or you want to share images and get feedback on the techniques, feel free to do so. I know that we're going to make a Facebook group for you guys to check out. I know that you'll get the address in an email when you purchased it. And if you want to shoot me an email, you're more than welcome to. And you can also find me on Facebook. It's facebook.com/Michael Kelley Photography. And that's it. So thank you so much. Have a good one.